All right, so I'm looking for the red bits for the Lego character, so I'll be sitting just there. Um, yeah. Okay, so I'm really terrible at making slides with titles and text on it, so it's going to be more of a show and tell, and I'm going to run you through some of the process of this lifestyle experiment that we've been doing for the past 2 years. So first off, I guess I come from a school dropout background where I was really interested into design, and that brought me into music and eventually into code. And now I try to mix all of this together to make live shows and things like this. So we travel doing live events with interactive technology. So for instance, this was done in Japan, and we were doing some work with Leap Motion at the time, and we were trying to push the boundaries of the tool. I'm traveling right now with my partner Rekka, who's sitting here, and together we've created this studio that we call 100 Rabbits. And this is our office. So as much as possible, this talk is to present a way of solving some problems, but it's not really something that we try to suggest or inspire people to replicate. It's just a different way to look at problem solving. For instance, we came here on our friend's van here, who's Hamish's van, and he's applying some of the concepts that I'm going to present you today, but living on land in a van, trying to make do with the off-the-grid living and finding solutions to how to be independent. So while this is our office from the outside, this is my desk and how we work. So this, even though it's like a navigation table that has charts and things underneath, we found a way to make it work as an office. So I still get to have my laptop, my pen tablet, this kind of stuff, like are surrounded by the radar and the breaker panel for the boat. And we share this together, so we are two people working inside the boat. And over there is Rekka's desk and office. And we can kind of see my Twitter feed, I guess. So we try to mix all of this development and game stuff with also learning as much as possible about the places that we visit. So instead of going to do really quick jumps between places, like if you were going to fly somewhere, let's say we used to fly, say for GDC, you spend like a week there and you barely scratch the surface of the place. We tried as much as possible to stay for extended periods of time. So like we came here, it took us 2 years, but it's not that far, right? Well, I mean, Vancouver is kind of far, but not that far. And at every stop, we tried to stay at least a month. So we were living in San Francisco on our way down, which is, this is our, I'm not sure, it's really hard to see, but can you see the continents at all? Right, so, yeah, I got, some people warned us that this would happen, but I like, nah. So on the far right would be, all the densely populated white dots is where we learned how to sail, because when we started, we didn't know anything about sailing. Basically, we were living in Montreal. Well, actually, this is clear. So we were living in Japan for a while, and we were living in Tokyo, and the rent was really high, and we had to leave Japan, but we wanted to keep traveling. But all the things that we learned on how to live minimally, like in a small space, we wanted to keep some of this, and apply this in our life. Our opportunity after Japan was to move back to Montreal, which we didn't want to do, or to keep traveling. But the problem with the traveling solutions that we found is that we would just fall back into the sort of cycle of buying a new bed and buying all the kitchen stuff and all this generation of garbage that we didn't want to. So it came as a solution. Actually, the only solution that we had was the boat seemed like the best thing that would allow us to keep doing what we liked. And at the same time, we didn't want to optimize in a way that would make us earn more money. Instead, we were looking in ways to need less. So the boat was just perfect. So this is kind of like pictures of our life in Japan, the places that inspired us. We like the place a lot, and we like to visit, we like to travel. We spent all of our days cycling around. We hated the work life, and we were thinking about how we could go back there, just traveling, because it was one of the best time that we had. But we didn't want to play the game of working in the office. I am personally a terrible employee, and I didn't want to try it again. So, in the beginning, what brought us to Japan, and I was playing music shows, so we would fly there, uh, spend a few time in Tokyo or Osaka or some places like this, and then we would fly back, always feeling like we were just barely scratching the surface. And I didn't start the timer. So just make a sign when you want me to leave. Excellent. Um, sorry. Okay, so just gonna run through the slides and kind of like try hopefully make a story out of it. But so I have put this slide in there because while we had to leave Japan, we brought with it a lot as much as possible of the culture that we found there. And then after that, we started to become more like collectors of cultures that we liked. So we brought some of the soy product that we enjoyed and tried to make our lifestyle as independent as possible. So instead of buying products, we would try to find ways to replicate almost everything. And that became the sort of connecting thread in the things that we were going to do. So at this point, we just left Japan. And this is Reka being super sad about us getting kicked out of Japan. And okay, so here's some of the game-related stuff. So we made some games. The first game that we made together is called Okoni. It was a IGF. It's a very hard game, I guess. But anyway, so it was a IGF nominated game that was inspired from being put in a place where we didn't understand the language being spoken around us, and having to try to figure it out, riddle it out. And in Okoni, for instance, there's no all the NPCs speak this language that is that we made up, inspired from Mayan scripts, and just it has no menu. The players left in a, it's more like a toy, I guess, in a sense. There's no, if you want to change the music, you have to find the music guy. If you want to tune the things or options you would find in the menu, you have to like find them inside the game. So the whole game and meta of it is all encrypted in this sort of aesthetic or game mechanics. So this game, we turned it into a book. We were always trying to find ways to make video games outside of just the screen. So we made a choose your own adventure book of that game that I showed you before. We also spent some time making designer toys that were completely open source. We would hopefully get people to print their own pieces. Like this is all not from us; it's from a studio that made their own design and like changed the design that were available on GitHub. We are working on this game right now, which also explores some of the aspects of our life now that we're becoming more and more nomadic. And I just wanted to put some more slides of video games that we made or worked on while we were either underway or before we left. I can go more slowly maybe, but this game, it was my first iOS development game. Made it in Japan, and it also features no language, and also hopefully inspired the player to try to learn the language of the game. We try to make our game as least mechanic heavy as possible, but more involved in the sense that hopefully people will try to look behind just the pretty pictures and try to decipher the world and so on. Anyway, so I got some point, I guess. Okay, so right now, we went from making games that would talk about our adventures in Japan to games that went toward more like the inspiring people to go travel and go abroad and explore other lifestyle. But we ran into one big problem, because when we left Mexico, okay, so on our way down, we started from, sorry, it's kind of a convoluted path, but so we started in Vancouver, went down American West Coast, we ended up in Mexico, and everything was fine internet-wise, and also like it felt pretty much like home, even though we were on a sailboat. But one thing that happened is that when we left when we left Mexico, we also left internet. So I'm not sure when was the longest time that you didn't have constant internet. But I think for me, for the past 10 years, the longest I've been without internet must have been 12 hours or like around that time. The sail between Mexico and Marquesas is 28 days. So 28 days without internet, you go through all this phase of, I guess, anger, acceptance, but if you're like me, I guess, and you start to think in pragmatic as much as possible ways of how you can use this time to make other things, then I saw this as an opportunity to think about solutions differently. So, for instance, one problem that we hit is that, let's say if you rely on Photoshop, well, after I think it's 3 weeks or 2 weeks, Photoshop will, if it cannot go online, it will just stop you from being able to use it. If you use Ableton Live, something similar will happen. If you use all these other like software that try to call home every once in a while, they will break down. And the most drastic example of this was a friend of ours was using his phone as a navigation aid. The iPhone, if you don't connect online for 4 weeks, it bricks. You get everything that you see when you turn it on is the iTunes logo telling you to connect it. If you're using that as your navigation aid, that leaves you in the middle of the ocean with no ways of finding your way back home, right? It's not like it's worse than Google Maps not being able to find your location or trying to move your GPS like this. It's you have no, you can, if you can read the stars, good for you. But but that so this sort of problem had us think about development in a completely different way, and I think that's why I was interested in coming here, because we see a lot of people who are, well, along our travel we meet people that don't have the means to do the work that they hope they would, but also they don't have the incentive, or nobody presented them the option for them to build their own tools. And while a lot of people here are tool developers, it's not second nature to most people to do this, to have this approach at solving things. So hopefully from this, the only takeaway from, I guess, from what I'm bringing you here is that there's always a way. And the way that we found was to build our own software. And building our own software was kind of an interesting process, because we use like power heavy, like energy consuming softwares like Photoshop and things like this. And we always complain about them not working or draining all our battery and so on. So we set on a quest to like replace Photoshop, replace Ableton, replace Sublime, all these other things by things that we built. And it was interesting. So so a lot of the work that I do involves creating vectors. So like the first easiest low-hanging fruits that I tried to tackle was to create a vector tool. And that was quite easy, because with WebKit and all this kind of stuff, you have access to a lot of things that make it easier. But when you start thinking about sound synthesis and this kind of stuff, which I have when I started, I had no idea how to replace Ableton. I had this like black box I was using every day that I would rely on to allow me to do my work. Well, I had to find ways to make it obsolete, or at least to take as much as possible from it, so I could replicate it in a way that it would not expire halfway between two destinations, so I could keep doing my work. And the last software that we decided to do was text editor. Rekha is writing a book, and we were not happy with the Office suite and this kind of tool. So we're like, well, maybe we can try to build our own writing software as well. And I have a screenshot here of I tried to replace Photoshop. So like, I was complaining about Photoshop a lot until I realized how hard it is to fix. And I mean, this whole creative process of like trying to replace things that you constantly complain about is really healthy, because I become like, as soon as there's any level of friction, I'm like, oh, this is garbage. These people don't know what they're doing. And then whenever gradually I've been trying to replicate their work, and I realized how much it's hard. And my goal with the Photoshop replacement thing was that I was like, well, Photoshop is simple. It's just a drawing app, and I can probably make a version of it that uses less battery. Oh, really? So this is my. So one thing that we moved toward was to not only replace the software but also replace the hardware, because we both work on MacBook that eat incredible amounts of battery using an OS that really wants to go online. And so gradually the direction that we've been moving is to replace all the closed source open electronics, not only that we use for writing apps and games and things like that, with Raspberry Pi. So this is my setup right now with my laptop. I can't use it because it's late at night and the solar power don't. This is a piano, and this is a weather this is how we get the weather, and well, hopefully this is what I will be able to build in the next few months, a completely smart sailboat inspired from the people who have small houses. And on the side, I've been complaining so much about OS X that I'm thinking like maybe I'll replace OS X with my own OX. Thank you very much, I'm sorry.